Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Duo Dive. Tonight we are talking all about enamel collecting, and I think that is going to be very exciting because Patrick and I both have such an interesting, diverse collection of enamels to show you tonight. And I think you guys are going to really enjoy the show, and it's something that maybe you'll come across at your next antique or vintage shopping trip. So welcome to you, Patrick, and I'm loving your hat.
Well, thank you very much. I was struggling a little bit. Got the lobster and the drinks shirt, and I couldn't figure out what my hat pin was going to be today. So since we were talking about enamel, I grabbed one of my enamel pins. So it doesn't like super match my shirt, but it will.
It goes with the theme.
Yeah, it goes with the theme. So it's enamel. It's not a Steinbock enamel, but it is one of only a couple enamel pins that I have. So it was the closest to match the lobster and whatever. I don't know, with Mai Tais. I don't even know what kind of drinks these are, but
tropical drinks.
Tropical drinks. There we go. I don't have an Austrian shirt to wear, so I'm talking about Austria tonight, and you're actually talking about what, British tonight?
Yes, English enamels. And I was doing the same thing, Patrick. You were trying to find the perfect thing to go with our talk tonight. And I thought, well, this is kind of an English looking shirt and design. So we'll go with that. I don't have any porcelain or enameled pieces to wear in the brooch department, but it was fun putting this together anyway.
There's an odd thing, which I don't understand, but when I was in Austria, the restaurant next to the hotel was called, I think it literally was called something like no kangaroos or something like that. And we're like, and the first trip when we visited, I was with my daughter, and we're like, well, I don't understand. And they said so many people confuse Austria with Australia that they literally created a restaurant that was no kangaroos. And there's a scene in Woman in Gold, which is all about art appropriation after the Nazis in Austria. And same thing, there's a guy that's like, oh, I really want to go to Austria. My daughter just loves kangaroos. So I could have worn a kangaroo shirt, but I don't think I own one. So we just do lobsters. Yep, no later, Jose and Tim. Sorry.
It's really funny because when I was prepping for the Duo Dive and I was doing my promotions, I would type in Austrian and it would automatically correct to Australia. And so I had to double
Austria just keeps getting forgotten
because I'm like, no, I don't want Australia. That is not what we're talking about tonight.
But people that know my channel know that my daughter was a German major. She studied abroad in Germany. And so our family's all things German. I kind of migrated as the contrarian, and I jumped the border, and I like all things Austrian. And that's actually like almost the sole reason that my Austrian enamel collection started. And I loved the triptych that Nate did a couple weeks ago on enamel cloisonne. And so that was when Katie and I first started talking, like, okay, well, these are not cloisonne. Like, these would not fall in that same category, but they are absolutely enamels. But it's a whole different category. And then there's the whole category of getting into enameled jewelry, which I'm sure, Katie, you could do a triptych on that someday. But it's a fun little collection, and it's difficult to research. So it's not something I ever wanted to do a triptych on, but I thought it'd be fun. And, Katie and I decided it'd be fun to combine resources, and I get to show my collection. She shows her collection. You learn a little bit about decorative enamels that are not cloisonne.
Which is fun. I got into collecting my little enamel boxes through my mom. She studied abroad in England, in Oxford. She had an apartment there, and she would travel to these little tea rooms on her bicycle that had a basket in the front, and she would bring home all kinds of fun treasures. In fact, I have a whole dinner set from England that she shipped back to her mom. And I found these little boxes through her because she would bring them back on her bicycle and ship them back home. And we've always had a little collection of them lying around the house growing up. And I just thought they were so wonderful. And my mom gave them to me. So I started out with hers, and I've been slowly adding when I can find them at a good price, because they are somewhat expensive for little boxes, but rightfully so because they're so well made. But that's how I got started collecting these little enamel pieces. And it's great, Patrick, that we can join forces for this particular Duo Dive.
Absolutely. So I think I'm going to say some hellos.
Yeah, we'll say some hellos, and then we'll let Patrick get started with his collection. Tim is joining us in the chat here from Canada, so welcome, Tim. And we've got Jerry, my flea market treasure, so welcome, Jerry. Jeannie is tuning in from Chicago. We've got Brian Hans from Chicago as well, and Kara the Kitschy Corner. I'm sorry, Kara, I don't remember where you're from. Patrick might know. It's hard to remember
Georgia,
everybody. Oh yeah, Georgia maybe. And Tiger from Timeless Treasures. So welcome, Tiger. Thanks for tuning in. So welcome to everyone joining in the chat. Now this is a duo dive, so you can ask questions throughout the evening, and I will highlight them on screen. So if you have anything you're curious about, make sure you ask it, and we'll get it up on screen and answered, hopefully for you. And we're going to kick things off with Patrick's collection of Austrian Steinbach.
All right, so I'll start with the largest piece. So most of the collection that I have, we'll kind of jump from this is the largest to the smallest. When I started collecting, I started collecting the small pieces because they were small. They were fun. They were, brightly colored. There's just some beautiful pieces on here. This is Stephen's Dome of Vienna. So for some reason, the name is not painted into the banner. So either they forgot to paint it or somehow it got worn out. I think they just forgot to paint it. They did do pieces like this as souvenir pieces. So we'll start with, it's easiest to see on the largest one, what enamel, what the enamels are what we're talking about. So a lot of people might know enamel from cookware or enamel, enameled cups, things like that. And it's the same concept. It's a metal base. And then in this case, it is a brass base. And this one actually has a base to it. And it is painted on both the front and the back. But unlike the cloisonne that Nate had talked about, there's no wires, there's no anything in here that you're filling in the enamels. So they're very beautifully painted, but there's not the hundreds of steps that the cloisonne manufacturing process would require. So Steinbock itself is typically easy to identify because they're always going to have some level of a stamp to them. Now, the history of Steinbock is it was founded in 1951 and it folded in 1993. So I did at least find some sort of reference that gave what the actual history of the company was. And during that time, they created multiple they had multiple stamps. So from what I can tell, the stamp that actually has the email Studio Steinbach, and Tiger's in the chat, so he can help out with some of this. I don't know how to pronounce it, but EMAILLE is the German word for enamel. And so for whatever reason, when they started printing it, they dropped the last two letters and they started referring to Steinbach enamel as Steinbach email. And the earliest, the name of the company was Email Studio Steinbach. So that's what we believe, or I believe, is the earliest, because none of the earlier pieces were dated. So I have a handful of pieces that have that style, the Email Studio Steinbach, which has, and then this is also something I discovered after I was researching it. If you look there in the middle, that is a goat. And Steinbach is the German word for goat, which is then also the German word for the zodiac symbol for Capricorn. So when you start looking for Steinbach, a lot of times you find zodiac stuff because it's actually the goat, the Capricorn goat. So the Email Studio Steinbach seems to be some of the earlier pieces. But what they also did, also with the Email Studio Steinbach, several of them started getting signed. So they are hand painted. So that's what I'm focusing my collection on now. I'm trying to focus on the hand painted ones. So these I still believe are on the earlier days because it's still saying Email Studio Steinbach, but they did change at some point. So you've got a lot of folk designs, and they're almost always a solid color on the outside and then printed all the way up the rims. And sometimes it's just a floral design like this one. This is a slightly smaller dish. Most of mine are pin dishes, trinket dishes, things like that. But I do have a handful of boxes. Katie's going to show a lot more boxes than I do. But, Easter's coming. So you've got a little Easter box.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So that one also is Email Studio Steinbach. And that one is signed by Gert, I believe is who that one was. So I have no listing of how many people were artists within Steinbach. So I don't know how many different signatures I'll have to collect, but it's fun to try and find the signed ones, because if the research I'm finding makes sense, those are on the older side. They started changing, but it's very, very similar. They started doing a different stamp that, like, at first glance looks the same, but now it says Steinbach email. So this, I believe, is a little bit later, but it's still a stamped version. So this one has kind of a cool monochrome, but it still has
Ooh, I like that
female.
red.
Yeah, so it's female. It's a beautiful red color with all the white, but then it still has the gold around the edges. And then the backside is in a bright red. And that's what I don't tend to go for, really bright colors. That's just never been my thing. But these are so small. They're just very attractive. And unlike some of what Katie's going to show, they're not necessarily always that expensive. You can typically get them between 10 and 20 bucks, depending on this design and the condition. This is one of my favorites because just with that black and gold design, it's got the coach with the horse-drawn coach and the coachman, built into it. That one's slightly larger, but it's a lot of these are dishes. Now I changed to the Steinbach email. This also has Steinbach email, but this one is also signed. So I do have some confusion on how the dates progressed, because in some cases they're still being hand painted, so they're still being signed. In other cases, they're not. So I'm not sure what that means. From the collectability standpoint, at least for pricing, I've not seen a main difference on whether one is signed or not signed. They all pretty much go for about the same price. It's the design that dictates everything. So I'll show again. These were the first couple that I got. That the Stevens Dome in Vienna, I liked that one, but I liked the sizes of these. So you've got an upside down horse. So you get the really light, the powder blue horse. You've got a pastel folk art of a female figure, and then a pastel of just all pink. They get into different shapes, and then that also started changing some of the stamps. So you've got kind of the eyeball shape.
Ooh, I like that shape a lot, Patrick.
With the bird in the middle, so it's a lot more multicolored. But what they did on this one is the stamp is engraved, impressed into the back, so it's not printed. So I think this one is a little bit newer, and yeah, they're all just little dishes. So here's my tape measure. The little circular ones that I was showing, they are 2 1/4 inches across. So they're all very small, 2 1/4 inches. This one's a little bit bigger, but not by much. So they're all very diminutive in size, but they also get into.
You mentioned the hand painting, and I know with Halcyon Days, what they do is they put a transfer on after the first enamel base color is done, and then they go in and hand paint the transfer and fill it in so it has the basic design. Do you know if that's how those are done?
I've not found anything that talks about the description of how it's painted. Like, if there's something with this pink one, if you feel the paint, you don't feel anything across the pink, but you actually feel a little bit of roughness with the gold. So it's possible that it's the gold was what was hand painted, because this moved into another era where they started using a sticker. And so it still says they're handmade in Austria, but they don't say hand painted. So I think there's still the hand touch to it, but they're not signed. But some of them, it looks like the artwork was done by hand. And I actually have an image that I wanted to show. I don't have an example of this one, but it's an example of the fact that these are hand painted. So this is a triangular plate that I have my eyes on. Obst is German for fruit. So it's just a little street scene. This is probably getting into the 60s. So if you look at the colors on the fruit cart, look at the luggage over here on the side. It's blue coat, blue and red apron. Here's another one that's for sale. All the colors.
Wow.
So the cart color is different. The luggage is now red. She's in like a purple and a mauve. He's in a purple coat. So it's the exact same design, but it was hand painted by somebody, somebody just picked a different color palette. So I think that's a really good indication that it is hand done and you can get some variation to it, which is, I think, adds to the quirkiness of it. This is another example. I only have one of these, but I found others and their dresses all become different colors. This is an ink blotter. So they did have functional pieces as well. So this metal piece comes out. You'd put your paper blotter across it, stretch it inside the frame, and you now have an ink blotter for your fountain pen.
Wow, that is fantastic. I've never seen one of those.
No, so I couldn't buy this fast enough. These do not come up very often. It still was not expensive. I think I probably only paid 20 or 25 bucks for it. So they're still not that expensive. And partially because really who uses ink blotters anymore? But they did have functional pieces. They also were really big into jewelry. I do not have any of their jewelry, but they made the same artwork could be done. Most of them, almost all of them, are bangle bracelets. But they do have jewelry. They make thimbles. They made ladies' compacts. They made candle holders. They made a lot of different pieces, including the trinket boxes. As I showed the one piece, a couple of things that changed is as they got newer, the stickers became more common. So I think these are getting a little bit more common, but they are more current. But they still have all the same designs. Even this one, which has, I think, the most modern version of the label, this is probably getting into the late 80s, if not into the 90s. This one is still a design that was probably available for a long time. They have very similar looks, but this one is an actual trinket box, and you can tell there is some age to it because there's some patina on the edge that is not in the center. And then they even painted a little flower on the inside of the lid.
I love those boxes with the
to decorate up. So I don't have that many boxes, but the one thing to be on the lookout for Steinbach, which because they don't come up very often, their prices are much higher, is they did do a modernist line. So you start comparing, all of these other pieces that look very, very similar, then they did this. These don't come up that often. Now, this one also is stamped on the metal. This, I would say, based on the look, is also probably from the 60s. So the company started in 51. So this is still relatively early compared to closing in 93. They just don't have them very often. There's the name that the Broman Bovano I'm not as familiar with. The other Austrian name that comes up quite a bit is Arta. And the funniest name ever, and I'm sure Tiger can correct me on how to pronounce it, but at first glance, it looks like Free Willy. It's Freywylle. So it's probably Freyvilla, but it's Free Willy to me. Free Willy is, that's very high end. They are still manufactured, but they're the same process. Some of them have the same look. And then Arta had a lot of the artists leave Steinbach to go to Arta. And so it lasted a little bit longer into the 90s, but I think it is now also defunct. But some of these same designs show up. But almost always they're going to be marked. So almost always you're going to be able to tell on the back, whether it's a sticker, whether it's engraved, whether it's printed, there is some way of recognizing a Steinbach piece. This one caught me off guard, because this is like, which one of these is not like the other, but it is so different. I like the looks of this a lot. And I just don't come across a lot of these. I've never found a catalog raisonné of all of the pieces they've made. I've never found, if you go on Etsy or eBay, you can find dozens and dozens of these. They all look like this. They all have this same folk art appeal, which is very attractive. But there's not a lot of variety. So that's why I decided to try and move myself toward collecting just the signed pieces. Not, again, that they're not necessarily that much more valuable, but I just found them a little bit more interesting because you now know, in this particular case, Anna is the one who actually designed this one. So maybe if I find two different pieces, I can see kind of a variety of what Anna has made, assuming there's only been one Anna. At one point, they were very, very popular in the 80s. That was kind of their height with tourism. And so I think at that point, they said they had 200 employees, but it was a very short-lived spike. So it's was around for about 50 years, but not a lot of printed history. A lot of the dates and information I found was from one blog post that somebody found some pieces and wrote about them. It's like, oh, I wish I could find some information about Steinbach. And then the daughter of the Steinbach family contacted her, like, here's some information. And that's literally as much details out there. So Hannes and Heimo, I'm sure you can put that in your Jeopardy questions the next time. Hannes and Heimo Steinbach were the brothers who founded the company, and their daughter or granddaughter kind of filled in some of the information on the dates. So it's fun. It's, again, not super, super expensive, and you can get into colorways. Like if you really like the dark, rich colors, or if you like the pastel colors, or you like the little souvenir pieces. There's a couple really cute souvenir pieces that I like. And this one's actually a little different. These are the little pin dishes. This one's even smaller, and it's a little bowl. So I don't know if it would have been as a salt cellar, just another pin bowl, but more of a souvenir piece. So that is the variety of Steinbach that I've got in my collection.
Those are fantastic, Patrick. And I love all the detail and design to those. And the shapes are lovely. And like you said, they're small. So they're a great little collection for a small little cabinet or space. And I just didn't know they existed in all of those designs. One of the things, too, that I like is that they're inexpensive for the most part to collect, because I'm just about to share with you some Halcyon Days pieces. Well, they're not as expensive.
Yeah, that's not going to be as easy. And I want to go back to the first piece, because what I didn't highlight is this is a Christmas piece. So they did do some pieces that they started doing annual pieces that were dated. This is significantly larger than any of the other ones, but they did do some themed ones, just like the vacation or the souvenir pieces. So there are ways to collect it where you can collect by theme as opposed to just collecting an entire enamel collection. My struggle is, and I'm very curious to see how you do it, I don't know how to display it, because they're so small, and when they stack right inside of each other, and I don't want them to chip. So it's trying to figure out, how do you take these tiny little pieces, which I love, how do you display them even in a small curio cabinet for people to be able to enjoy them? So that's still my struggle.
And that is really hard too with these boxes, because they're so small. I mean, look at this one. It is easy to get lost. Now, I do display these in front of my TV in my bedroom. So I have them kind of like arranged by height from large to little, and I just kind of step them down in front of the TV like that, and they're really nice that way. The light comes in and hits them, and I get to kind of admire them every night before I go to bed. So I do like that, but I still haven't found the perfect place to really display these. So that is tough. Maybe
now, do you display them? Do you display them sitting upright, or do you display them on their sides?
I display them sitting upright, and some of them do have little stands that you can rest them in, particularly when you get into the egg shape. These are hard to display, so they do make little copper stands that they sit in, or brass stands, but those are pretty hard to find by themselves, and they are very expensive to buy. So I only have like one of those. So this guy, I just sit him like this, and hope he doesn't roll off.
Hope Louis doesn't get too curious.
Hopefully not. Well, Halcyon Days is a wonderful little company, and I'm going to tell you about them. Before we get into really the history of the company, I want to talk a little bit about enameling on copper, because that technique was very popular through the second half of the 18th century. But by 1850, they weren't really doing that anymore. The only time they would use that is for more utilitarian items like pots. So there was a big lull in that art technique, and it did go by the wayside. But in 1950, when Halcyon Days was founded as a little antique and arts emporium, that technique was revived. And it was all thanks to Susan Benjamin, who founded Halcyon Days in 1950, who decided that she wanted to kind of revive this art style of enameling on copper. And so she teamed up with a wonderful family, the Marshall family, who was very skilled at making these boxes. And she brought her designs to them, and they worked together to make these boxes, and they made some really fantastic designs throughout the years. And in fact, by 1959, their company had gotten so big and their boxes were so popular that they had to move from their Avery Rose store in Mayfair, London, to a bigger store off of Brook Street. And now they're pretty well known pretty much everywhere in England. And the cool thing about Halcyon Days is they are still in existence. So you can go to their website and buy any of their fabulous trinket boxes right now. They also do enameled bracelets like Patrick was talking about. They make scarves and they do other wonderful things. Halcyon Days is really fantastic. And it's one of the best enameled box makers in England, in my opinion. And there's a good reason for that, because they actually hold 3 royal appointments, and that's a pretty big deal. So let me talk a little bit about royal warrants. If you don't know,
really, can I back up for a second before you move forward? You mentioned that they're still manufacturing. Do they retire designs, or can you buy something today that they designed 50 years ago?
So that is a good question. No, they do retire designs, and after a while, designs go away. And so they are things that you can buy on the secondary market through eBay, Etsy, that type of thing, but you can't buy all of their catalog on their website. Right now, if you go onto their website, they do have some beautiful trinket boxes for the Jubilee of the Queen, and they are priced at $400. So they're not cheap, but they are beautiful. They have a lovely music box that opens up that has a beautiful scene of Big Ben, Parliament, and the phone booth. That's very iconic to England. And so that would be a wonderful trinket box to have, but quite expensive, but rightfully so because they're so well made. But definitely most of my pieces have been found through eBay because I look for some of the older designs, since now when you do buy them through their website, they're pretty expensive. You can also have one custom made if you're interested in that as well. They do a whole custom made section on their website. You have to contact them, and I don't think that they do it for everybody, but you can email them and have your designs or your envisionment, if that's a word, put on to a box. So that is something that they do offer, but I'm sure that service is very, very expensive. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about why Halcyon Days is so special and why their boxes, to me, are some of the best boxes you can get. Now, there are different manufacturers of these boxes. In fact, in a minute,
I distracted you from your royal warrant section, so don't forget about the royal warrant.
I won't.
Okay.
So these boxes are Crummles. There's lots of different manufacturers in England that do these boxes. There's Crummles, there's HUCKSTER, I think, makes some, but Halcyon really is the best. And one of the reasons is because they were the first company to start making these small boxes, these revival boxes, and they have the royal warrant. Now, that's a really, really big deal. And royal warrants are special because they're granted to only companies that have supplied goods or services to different royal families for over 4 years. Not everybody just gets a royal warrant. So they are one of the only companies out of 14 in the entire world to hold all 3 royal warrants. So it's a royal warrant, I believe, of art and something else, but they have all 3 of them, which is a really big deal. And of course, they're making stuff for the Queen's Jubilee. So, they definitely have the stamp of approval, and they just make some of the best quality boxes, in my opinion, which is why I like them so much. Their designs are just really lovely. So I'll show you some of the ones that I have. And before I get too far into the boxes, I know a lot of you guys are probably wondering why they're called Halcyon Days. And I love that word. This will be your new word of the day. You can share this with all your friends, but that's how it's spelled. And Halcyon basically means a period of time in the past that was happy and peaceful. So when you see these boxes, don't they make you smile? They do really bring you back to a time that's happy and peaceful and wonderful. Of course, Halcyon also is mentioned in Shakespeare the Fifth, or the Fourth, I believe, play. So they do have their names from Shakespeare. And there's also a note to Halcyon Days, if you, that term Halcyon back, all the way back to the Greeks and mythology, and you can research that if you want. That's a whole fun rabbit hole to go down, but that's part of their name. But Halcyon is just such a wonderful word, and these boxes do make you happy, and they bring back a fond memory that's happy and peaceful. So this little box here is enameled on copper. It has a little lid, and it says, "When life gives you lemons, make lemonade." I picked this box up on eBay, and it is just lovely. It's got the black base, and then it's got all of the beautiful colors with the yellow and then the blue and the white. And I really love this box. Another thing that I like about these little enamel boxes, just like Patrick showed with the one that he opened up that has a design inside, a lot of them do have like a little hidden design. So this one has a lemonade pitcher on the lid
cute.
with little lemons. And it's just so fun. Little lid screws on. So they all screw on like this. Now, these are made in a very interesting way. So most of these enamel boxes are made the same way, but Halcyon has really perfected their technique because they have some of the best manufacturers and skilled artisans making these boxes. So basically, these boxes here start out as a sheet of copper, and then they're hammered into whatever shape. So if you have, say, the egg shape, it would be hammered into that shape. If you have this round shape, it would be hammered into round. They also make a series of longer square boxes or rectangular boxes, which I don't have because they're very expensive, but they're lovely. And so they're hammered into whatever shape, and then they are washed in acid bath. And what that does is it gets rid of all the copper impurities that's on the copper, and then they are washed with soap and cleaned. And then the surface is roughed up before they apply the enamel. That's really important so that the enamel sticks to it. So if you notice on this box, they've got a base coating here that is black. So this box would have been dipped in a black enamel. And basically, enamel itself is made from fine pieces of glass and different chemicals to make that enamel. And then it's mixed with a clay slurry. And that is how they make that color there. So this is like a base color, that black. And then what they do is they fire the enamel. And then they've got to put that on several times so it really sticks. You can't just do one coat of the base. And then they add a transfer design. So they'll transfer like a design onto it that's not painted or colored in, but just sort of a guideline of what will be added. And then there are skilled artisans that hand paint all of this enamel on, and then it is fired again and finished, and it turns into a lovely little box like this. So that's how these trinket boxes are made. And this one's Halcyon Days. These are very hard to date unless they are marked. I have not found a way to date them because pretty much their stamp has not changed. So they all have a very similar stamp. Sometimes you will see a slightly different stamp if they are something that's paired, say, with a brand. So I'll show you this next box. This is Disney. So Halcyon Days and many of the different English enamel companies do team up with places like Disney or storybooks or different manufacturers to make their boxes and get some of their designs. So this one is 1996 Disney. So you can see it has a slightly different stamp on the bottom, but this is a little Mickey box, and there's Mickey doing all of his little fun things around the side of the box. There's a little puddle. He's slipping, and now he's saying hello. And then you've got him on the top. That's kind of my best narration of what Mickey's doing on this box. If you open it up, it's got a little bubble that says, wow. And just imagine that in a Mickey voice, because I cannot.
Now, I've got a quick question because I'm totally jonesing on these now. So I went on to eBay before you jack up all the prices with everyone wanting to buy one. And they have a lot of what they're calling trinket boxes that do not seem to be going for as high of a price, but they're all with hinged lids, not with the the lids that come off. So is that something with the way they're manufactured? Is it the trinket boxes are less expensive, or are some of these just people don't know what they have?
So, it kind of depends on what you have and the design that you have. The ones that are specifically dated for, say, Mother's Day, 1996, or this one is Easter, 1981, those are collectible to a certain audience, but the majority of people that are collecting these boxes, they like them for the design. So if there is something that says Mother 2003, Well, I don't know that the average collector is going to want that unless they specifically collect dated boxes, because that's a very specific thing. That was a gift that was given for a particular memoriam of a date. And I don't think the average person is going to want that. So those tend to be cheaper in my research and opinion, and the years I've spent looking for these. Now, this one does say Easter 1981. I liked it because it has the merry-go-round design, and I just thought that was really beautiful. And the Easter was just such a small little font that it really didn't distract from the rest of the design. So I did pick this up, and this is a great example of a box, or an egg really, because they do make egg shapes, that is hinged. It does have the Halcyon Days down in the bottom there. But it didn't cost me very much. I think I paid around $30 for this because it did say Easter 1981. So this was not one of the ones, say, that is more desirable like the Mickey. The Mickey one is going to be a little bit more expensive because it is Mickey and there is a big collector's market for Disney, but you've also got something that's not particular to a particular date or holiday or design. So people like Mickey. Mickey's classic. He's recognized all around the world. And so this one, of course, appeals to many collectors. So I think it does depend on the design. Also, sometimes the size of the box matters. I found that when you get into those longer rectangular ones or bigger square ones with the hinged lids, those seem to be going for more, and they're a little bit more unusual in my research. This is a great example of one that does go for a little bit more money.
Oh, sweet.
Not because it's hinged necessarily, but because it features Beatrix Potter, yes, and Peter Rabbit.
Now, did you say how far back Halcyon Days goes? Yeah, a lot of them I'm finding are also in the 80s. When did the company start? Do you know?
Yes, the company started in 1950 in England. So they've been around since 1950. They are the first company to revive this enamel on copper technique to make these boxes. Now, you will find a lot of boxes that are enameled, but they're not Halcyon Days. They're not Crummles. They're not Limoges. And I'm going to cover Limoges in a whole nother series. Limoges is actually a region. It's not a particular manufacturer. It's a region of France, and they do some of the best quality enamel boxes that you can buy out on the market next to the English ones. But you'll find a lot of trinket boxes that are not marked, and they're cheap. They are not some of these expensive ones because the hinges are not as well made. The enamel's kind of off. They just are cheap kind of tchotchkes, in my opinion. They are pretty, and they do have a certain collector's value for people that just like the trinket boxes. But if you want the really nice ones, you want to stick to Halcyon Days, you want to stick to Crummles, you want to stick to Limoges, that kind of thing. So if you find an average trinket box that's not marked with anything, and Halcyon Days is always marked, and it doesn't seem to be as good, you can just tell, like, for example, with this Beatrix Potter one, when you open it up, you can hear how well it closes and how well it opens. And you can just see that hinge really is nice. So you will find that these are just much better. The lids fit really nicely, and you can tell you're getting something of quality versus the other ones, which are pretty, but they're not really going to hold a collector's value like these do. And these are still going, like I said, depending on the design and the one, for good money. Some of these range anywhere from $100 to $800, depending on the one you have. And then there are some, like the Easter one here, that you can get at a really good bargain for 30-something bucks. It just depends on the one. And some people have these and they just don't know what they have, so you can get them at a good price. So this is Beatrix Potter. It features Peter Rabbit. Go run along now and don't get into mischief. Great little design there. It is marked Beatrix Potter on the bottom. So any of these that you find that are collaborations between a particular brand, or they use a storybook character or design, they will always be marked as such. So this one is Beatrix Potter. The one I showed earlier is marked Disney. Now, what's interesting to note about this Beatrix Potter one is it's marked 1996. And when I get into a little bit about Crummles, in 1995, they ended their relationship with using Beatrix Potter. They were no longer allowed to use Beatrix Potter designs. And I can't find a direct link to this, but I do believe that's when Halcyon Days got the rights to use Beatrix Potter designs, because I see a lot of them the year after that Crummles was stopped using Beatrix Potter. And I don't really know the reasoning for that. It's just a fact that after that year, they didn't have any of the Beatrix Potter designs. So this one is really lovely. And it says, now run along and don't get into mischief, right in the top. This was one of the boxes that my mom had. She's always loved Beatrix Potter, and we read that story a lot growing up, the Peter Rabbit tales. So this was just really fantastic.
Now, looking online, it looks like, at least in some cases, they were made available with a fitted case. And I'm big for the fitted box. How much does the value change if you have the original box with the paperwork? Because it looks like the paperwork is sometimes what has the dates on it.
Yes. So one of the ways that you can date these is if you do have the paperwork in the box. I do not have any paperwork or boxes with mine.
Okay.
That does affect value. You can get a little bit more if you have the fitted boxes, because they're very nice boxes. They have a satin lined interior, and then they have the information inside. But if you get just the box by itself, you can usually get a little bit of a better deal. So for me as a collector, as much as I love fitted cases, I don't have room to store all the fitted cases.
True.
So I don't mind picking these up without the cases because I'm not going to display them in it. However, if you do find one with the case, it does increase its value a little bit, in my opinion. And a lot of collectors do like to display them in the cases in their curio cabinets. So I do have a couple of other beautiful Halcyon Days pieces, and this one's very little, but it is just fantastic. It's got this blue enamel, and I call this the Dutch boy. Now, I don't think that's its exact name, but we had a story growing up that we read all the time called The Boy in the Dike. And it was about a little Dutch boy who was just too small. His parents kept saying, "You're too small to do anything." And then one day, his arm was just the right size to fill the hole in the dam, and he saved the whole city from water spilling everywhere and flooding the town. So
wait, your version had him using his whole arm?
Yes.
I don't recall that version. I always thought it was just a finger.
So my mom picked up this box because it reminded her of the little Dutch boy in the story we used to read all the time, The Boy in the Dike. So I call this boy the Dutch boy, but I'm sure he has another name. But look at the design to him. It's just wonderful. And I love that little ship next to him. And when you open him up, he's a screw type, and he doesn't have anything inside of him. So sometimes they do have little surprises. Other times they're just that beautiful white enamel. But you want to look for these boxes when you find them and make sure they're in good condition, because this is another example of a box I got at a very good price. It's a little pug, little Louie. I had to have him, but it is damaged. So you can see the copper coming through the enamel. And I picked him up for about $25, and he is Halcyon Days. So it was a very good bargain, and I just turned that spot around because what I'm really focused in on is the top. But most collectors would not pick something up with the damage to the enamel. And if these things do fall, they do chip, and that is something that you have to worry about.
How much would you say does affect the value?
I would say at least half of what
you
could get for it, in my opinion, because people like the enamel to be smooth and in good condition. And really good enameling on these boxes is nice and smooth and clear and bright and beautiful, not kind of watery or cheap looking like some of the counterparts that you find at gift stores. And nothing wrong if you collect those other counterpart boxes. I just find that the Halcyon Days really are known for having some of the best enamels and best techniques. So you want to make sure that your piece is in good condition. So that is all of the Halcyon Days boxes I have. I don't have a ton of them because they are expensive, and I've been looking for them online, and sometimes I'll search just Halcyon boxes. Sometimes I'll search Halcyon Days, and then other times I will search for just enamel boxes. So if you search different terms, sometimes you can find what you're looking for at a good price because someone doesn't know what they have. So that's a little.
What I found on eBay is it basically auto-filled all the way into then also the category of decorative collectibles. But then once you go in there, you can open the filter and go back to all categories and you find more. So just be aware, eBay is trying to send you places, but you know, for people that are looking for them, if you know what buttons to hit, you can maybe find more.
Yes. And you just have to look at the different boxes and styles and designs and find the ones you like. You know, that is really the beauty of the Halcyon boxes is they make so many different designs. As you can see, they made the Lemons boxes, they made Disney, they made all of the Beatrix Potter pieces. I mean, there's just tons of different designs out there for everybody. So you can start a collection of these just by finding what you like. And that's exactly what I do is I just search, and if I find a design I'm interested in, I'll see if I can find it under $100 because some of them can be worth more. And the prices are, when you go on eBay, I will say sometimes they're all over the place. You have to kind of look at the design, the quality, the size. Many things affect the price
And the damage. You know,
yeah
some of the cheaper ones are the ones with some damage on them. So
yeah. And I don't mind picking up damage if it's something, you know, that is unique. Like I never was able to find another pug one. I looked for this one at the time that I saw the one with damage, and there wasn't another one out there. I couldn't find one on Solds. And so I thought, yeah, this is pretty unique. It's $24. I can turn the damage around. And so I picked him up, and that was just because I have a pug and I just had to have him. So it was a fabulous piece, but many people don't like to collect with damage. It's just all up to you and your collecting styles.
now with the way that those were made, really quick, because I'm trying to find an example in mind, and of course now I can't find one, but where the damage comes in with Steinbach is there's not the brass or the copper trim like you have on your boxes. So what tends to get damaged on yours? So like where it happens on these, and I don't really have any with damage, but you've got this fine surface where you've got enameling coming up the outside, enamel coming in this way, and you can see there's a tiny, tiny chip right there. And that's where these tend to get damaged because, you know, even just nesting them into each other, if you suddenly ding right at the edge, it's enough to chip the enamel on either the inside or the outside. But I was looking at your boxes, they all had, you know, like a little cap on the bottom and a cap on the top. So they don't seem to have this exposed edge. So is it really just like if they've been dropped that you get that level of damage, like the one that you showed with the pug? Or where's the damage going to be most common on the box designs?
That's a good question, Patrick. Yes, mainly around these areas where they've got that
Where it meets the metal
piece. You will find that some of the hinges get dented. So around the hinges, sometimes they don't open properly or the hinges get bent. That happens just from years of being knocked around. The other place that you commonly see damage is on these solid pieces of enamel on the bottom where they've been dropped or knocked over. Sometimes you'll see scratching on the front, but most of the time people are keeping these in cases. So I don't actually see tons of them with damage. There are ones out there, but I don't see a ton compared to, say, depression glass or other things that we collect. But you do want to make sure that you read the descriptions if you're buying these online to make sure that you're getting an accurate description of what you're buying, and check all the pictures you can. And if you're looking at these in an antique store, you know, make sure you screw the lids on and off and make sure they fit tightly. A really good, well-made box will fit tightly. It will have a nice lid. Any of the ones that have the hinges, you know, snap it closed. You can really hear that snap on them. They shouldn't be loose. That should never be something that you'll find on Halcyon Days or Crummles or even Limoges. These boxes, if they do have that, they've probably been damaged in some way because they were not made to have poor quality hinges.
Since we're talking about it, I throw this one out again because this is one of the reasons I liked this one so much. Is because of this design, this brass piece has to snap into, and you still have this very thin enamel coming up against the enamel. That area is typically chipped, and this one's not. So this was probably never used. But that is an area to be, you know, where, like you said, where there's going to be wear. If you drop it, of course, you're going to get damage at the corners, just like anything else. But yeah, I can see why the Halcyon would pull higher dollar amounts than the Steinbocks because just the egg is made about the same way. It has the covering on all the edges, and there's another brass place on the bottom. So this one probably will be a little bit more protected, but the dishes don't have that level of detail like yours.
Exactly. Yeah, the Halcyon Days, they just really do bring the money compared to some of the others because they're just well made in that attention to detail. And I want to talk a little bit about Crummles because I have about equal amounts of Halcyon Days and Crummles. Crummles is another company that you commonly find in England when looking at these boxes. Crummles are well made, but they're not as well made as Halcyon. Again, I think Halcyon is the best. And they were formed by Mr. John Arras in 1970. Now, a lot of companies
Everyone,
saw
make your notes for the next Jeopardy tournament because we've given you the Steinbach brothers, and now we've got the Crummles owner.
Yes. So when you find Crummles, they are kind of secondary to Halcyon. A lot of companies, after they saw how successful Halcyon Days was with these enamel boxes, they started making designs as well. And John, the founder of Crummles in 1970, really fell in love with doing some of the designs that he read about growing up. So he featured a lot of storybook characters and things that was familiar to him that really made him happy. And he was very successful with that. So there are a lot of wonderful English Crummles designs out there. Now, I don't think Crummles is still in existence, if I've got my research right on that. You can find a lot of Crummles through eBay, and they are going to be a lot cheaper than the Halcyon Days most of the time. Sometimes they're a little bit more expensive, and this is a great example of one that I did pay up for a little bit, but look at the design on that.
That's gorgeous.
The detail on that is fabulous. It is a hot air balloon, and they did a whole series of these hot air balloons with that blue enamel, and they're just really lovely pieces. This is marked Crummles. Now, Crummles has this mark on the bottom. So it says Crummles and then usually made in England, and it's got that mark. Now, sometimes it will be a little different if they're doing things with a particular storybook. So they paired up, say, with Beatrix Potter or something to that effect. It will have that on the bottom. These are relatively hard to date as well. If you do have the boxes or the paperwork, sometimes you can date them. If you find them loose, they're kind of hard to trace down because this particular mark is very common to Crummles. I don't think it changed, so it's kind of hard to date. Now, this has that beautiful white enameling on the inside, and it's just a lovely box. But you'll notice that this box, the lid just fits on, and that's really what sets Halcyon Days apart from Crummles. As you'll notice, this lid just sits on. If you notice, Halcyon Days, they screw on. So they have an extra little method there that just makes them a tad nicer than the Crummles boxes. But the Crummles are still wonderful, and there's some gorgeous designs like this hot air balloon, and I love the look of this piece. They also did things with Paddington, which is one of my very favorite stories. And so here's little Paddington in his yellow hat with golf clubs. I just think he's adorable. This is one of the smaller boxes in this light blue color. And again, the lid just sits on. Now, one of the things I find that's kind of annoying about that is if you are displaying them in little stands or some way, sometimes the lids will fall off. So these I have found more damage on the lids than anything else because they're not as tight fitting. So you can see they're not as well made as the Halcyon Days, but they're still lovely, and they're a very fine manufacturer of these boxes. This one is marked Paddington and Company, so you can see it's got the same Crummles mark, but then it's got the Paddington mark on the bottom because they've paired up to do this particular design, and I just love him. He is so happy.
Now, do the Crummles designs, do they also date to your mother's interest in the English enamels, or did you start collecting those on your own?
I actually got this one from my mom. So I got the Pooh Bear one, and then I started collecting a whole bunch of other Crummles because I love their designs. And we read Winnie the Pooh and Paddington growing up a lot, and those were very special to my mom because her mom read those stories to her. So this is, Winnie the Pooh by E.E. Milne. And just a wonderful, wonderful box. So this one was my mom. She bought this in England, and I have it now. And I've started collecting a whole series of Crummles because my mom had this. I think my mom mainly collected the boxes that she just liked the designs of, whether they reminded her of Halcyon Days or of just something that made her smile. And so these things are very, very special.
Very cool. Now, she had asked earlier in the chat whether you were showing the Eloise one. Was that a Crummles one or is that a Halcyon Days one?
So that one's actually Limoges. So I will cover that in a whole nother triptych. As I mentioned, Limoges often gets, mentioned as a brand, but it's not a brand. It's a region of France that just made these enamel boxes, but they have a whole nother style of enameling and detail than these boxes do. They're very different in style. So we'll be covering those probably in a future triptych, because I'd like to be able to show you a chart and show you how you can really find what's true Limoges and what's fake Limoges, because there are a lot of fakes out there. So that's kind of a whole other topic, but I will be showing that Eloise box. Don't worry, Mom.
Excellent.
That one's special. I bought that in New York at the Plaza Hotel. So that one's actually probably the most expensive box I ever bought. I think that cost me $190, but it was worth it. There's a whole story to that. But this is wonderful. So here's Winnie the Pooh with his honey, storing it in a little cabinet. It is marked Crummles, enamels. Now this one has a slightly different mark, and that's again because it's got the design on the bottom for the fact that it's being Winnie the Pooh. And then it's also something that was manufactured or designed by E.H. Shepard. So they do have different little things like that. If it's a particular storybook character, sometimes you will find these. And the storybook characters in the Crummles line tend to go for a little bit more money than some of the other Crummles, because of course Winnie the Pooh and any type of storybook character that people remember, they're very popular and collectible. And of course, as I mentioned, anything with Beatrix Potter by Crummles, that ended in 1995. So people really do like those. You want to be on the lookout for that one. And this has that beautiful little white enamel on the inside. And the last Crummles box that I want to share with you today, this one is one that I picked up myself. And it is a little mouse sitting on a spool of thread reading a newspaper. And I have always loved mice. Our family has a connection to mice. And so, that's some of the other designs that I collect. It's just things that are kind of special to me or have meaning to our family. My great-grandfather would write, no, let me take this back. My grandmother's brother would write little stories about a mouse that he called Cecil. And it would travel the country, and my mom would get these letters from my grandma's brother about Cecil the mouse and all the things that he was doing. And so when I grew up, my grandmother would write little notes in the mail to me. She mailed them from Missouri with letters from the Green Mouse and say, the Green Mouse is having a party in Paris. And I always thought that was so fun as a kid, trying to figure out where the Green Mouse was traveling to. And so this little box reminded me of the Green Mouse, which is why I bought it. And I just think it's lovely. And this is a storybook character. This is actually one of the mice from Cinderella. So it is not branded Disney, but if you do some research on it, you will find that it's inspired by those little mice in Cinderella that have the spools of thread, and it is marked Crummles. It is absolutely lovely. So this is a fantastic box. Now, one of the things you find with Crummles more often than not is that their interiors are solid enamel, but this one actually does have a little castle on the inside, a little village scene, which I just think is lovely. So oftentimes with the Crummles, you don't find that design, but I particularly love this one because it does have the design and the little mouse, which is just such a wonderful little collection. So that's my collection of English boxes. I do have some HUCKSTER boxes, which I didn't bring out to show. Those are something that you will find at a very good price online because they're not as well made as the Crummles or the Halcyon Days, but they still are collectible. So you will find other English manufacturers of these. But if you want to start a collection, I would say start with Halcyon and Crummles, and then get into the world of all of the other English enamels and just buy what you like. That's really what these boxes are all about, is just buying something that evokes a Halcyon memory for you.
Excellent. Now, you had mentioned when you were talking about what was inside, particularly the Halcyon ones, I think you were talking about like whether there was a design painted into the top. Are you familiar with any of the enamel boxes where you actually got a trinket or something that was sold? What brand was that?
So Limoges did those.
Oh, Limoges did those.
I'm
Okay.
sure that other companies have used that technique in design as well. But one of the wonderful things about Limoges boxes, and I have a few of them, is you open them up and sometimes you'll find a surprise inside. So I have one that was manufactured for the 2000 New Year. And when you open it up, it actually has a champagne bottle, a fully enameled champagne bottle inside. I have another one that's a coffee bag, and it has 4 little enameled coffee beans that pop out on the inside. I have one that features bread, so it's a whole bakery. And then you open up, there's a little baguette inside. And then another one that is a little box that looks like a closed dinner box like you get at a fancy restaurant, and it has a little mouse on the front. You open it up and it's all these enameled cheeses. So Limoges is really well known for doing some of those extra little things. You don't seem to find those with the Halcyon Days or Crummles. Not saying that they don't exist, I've just never seen one. And I don't think the English enamel companies really focus on that. They are really big on the enamel designs on the outside. And they just make some wonderful pieces. So I hope this inspires you guys to maybe start collecting enamel, because the designs are just so lovely. And with Patrick's collection, you can pick them up for a pretty good starting price.
Yeah, some of the smaller ones are going for $5. You know, so you can really start a cute collection. They can be functional. You hold a lot of different items, or just pop a color to whatever decor you're trying to add to.
And exactly, Tiger. I mean, I don't consider myself super smart, but you know, the nice thing is with apartment living is these boxes are small. So you can start a whole collection of these, and they take up virtually no room, which I really like, and they just make you happy. I'm all about little things that make you happy. Be surrounded by things in your house that bring joy. You know, you're the one living there, so you got to enjoy the space you're living in, and it doesn't matter what you collect. If it makes you happy, then you are on the right track.
Absolutely. All right, well, this was a fun one, pulling this together. It was one we considered adding, trying to merge in the cloisonne, and Lucinda was asking about the cloisonne also. And it just decided that these were a little separate enough that it probably deserved its own discussion separate from Nate's discussion on cloisonne. But if you like cloisonne and you're interested in the enamel aspect of, let's see, what were the made up words? Cloisonne,
Pique le jour.
Pique le jour, and I want to say reclame, but that's not right.
No.
Champlavet.
That's
that was the one he made up. That is a triptych that is housed on Soul Nate's channel. So you can go find more discussion on enamels in his channel as well. But hopefully, yes, there's a little bit of variety. And just a quick search, you can find, I didn't look for the Crummles. Initially, I was spelling it wrong. But a very quick search for Halcyon and for Steinbach, you find all kinds of it. So it is definitely out there. And I'll throw a little tip on, or just interesting side bit. So these dishes, again, the company was founded in 1951. If you watch, there's a PBS show called The Paradise, which takes place prior to the turn of the century, London. They have they create a little vignette on a woman's boudoir. And there is one of these dishes sitting in the vignette because some set decorator saw it and just thought that the design was old school enough. And like, who's going to look at this and recognize it as a piece of Steinbock enamel? Me. But, so they do pop up. It's kind of fun to see. And most likely, if you look them in the wild, just like anything else Katie and I talk about, you'll probably start running across them now. And now you can recognize at a glance, and then you flip them over and say, okay. You may not want to buy it, but at least you'll know what it is.
That always happens. Every time we do one of these shows, I kid you not, the next time I go out, maybe because I know what it is now or know more about it or are interested in it, I see it. But it is just amazing because every time I always find something. Patrick and I were just talking about tobacco molds. Lo and behold, go into an antique store, find 2 that are framed that you just wouldn't expect to see in a Florida antique mall, but here they are, and it's just fantastic. So you never know what you're going to find, so keep on that hunt. And thank you all for tuning in tonight for this episode of Duo Dive. Do make sure you come back on Sunday for Tales from the Triptych. That will be hosted by me on my channel. And I'm doing something a little bit different. I am going to be doing a camera conversion. So I'm going to show you through video and through talk how to convert an old camera into a light. And that was Nate's idea. And he thought that would be really interesting for you guys. And I think it will be too. So we're going to be turning an Art Deco camera into a lamp. So make sure you come and tune in for that. So that will be different and interesting. And Patrick, what do you have coming up next on your channel?
So just for those who are familiar with my channel, I will not be having a sale tomorrow night. I had a sale last night with Sean at Skunky Junk, and through some scheduling issues tomorrow, I ended up having to cancel mine. So I did one sale this week, just not on my channel. So don't look for that tomorrow, but I will be back on my channel next week for the next Duo Dive, and I will be hosting a collector and reseller of HUCKSTER glass. So we're going to have a HUCKSTER glass specialist to talk about how to identify, value, and possibly resell pieces of HUCKSTER.
That is going to be wonderful. I love depression glass and love HUCKSTER, so that is going to be fantastic. Also, make sure you check out Beth's channel tomorrow, Carolina's Sweet Treats and Pretties. I will be on her channel doing a live chat. I believe, Patrick, you're going to be joining us, I think.
I am. I forgot, but yes, I am. So that's part of the scheduling conflict. But yes, I am going to. I made sure that I committed to her, so I'm definitely going to be on her channel. That is at 6 p.m. Eastern on the Carolina Princess Sweet Treats and Pretties YouTube channel.
And we'll be having a fun chat about the difference between live sales, drop sales, static sales, and all the things you want to know about sales here on YouTube and other platforms. So make sure you tune into that. And thank you all again so much for joining us. Share this with your friends and tune in to that next Duo Dive. See you all later. Bye-bye now.
Bye, everybody.